A couple months ago, I made a video on Thomas de Carnelon from Assassin's Creed Unity, talking about his life, his appearance in that game, and why he's such an overlooked assassin within the franchise. The guy was a legend. But today, I'm here to do the opposite for another one of the series' very forgettable assassins, who was probably even more stupid than most people realize. I'm talking about none other than Duncan Walpole from Assassin's Creed Black Flag's Prologue. Now, if you saw my How Far Can I Get in Black Flag Without Being Spotted video, you know my disdain for Duncan is no secret. His appearance in Black Flag is very brief and quite forgettable, and in my opinion, he is the worst master assassin we've seen in these games. Yes, believe it or not, this guy did actually become a master assassin, which as one myself is incredibly insulting to share a title with this man. But I guess they were handing out those promotions for free back in those days. And even though his appearance in Black Flag is very short-lived, literally, we still know quite a bit about his earlier life prior to Black Flag, thanks to database entries and some of the novels. Duncan was born in 1679 and enlisted in the Royal Navy at only 18 years old. But Duncan was extremely impulsive and had a bad temper. Traits that he clearly still had up to his death in Black Flag. But because of this, after only 3 years of being in the Navy, he failed to rise the ranks, so he left to get a job at the East India Company, where he would eventually be introduced to the British Brotherhood, led by its mentor Philip Randall. And initially, he served the assassins quite faithfully and strongly believed in their ways. He spent over a decade slowly training and rising through the ranks, where he would finally become a master assassin. However, as he rose the ranks, once again his quick temper and impulses led to him getting into many fights with the high-ranking members of the Brotherhood as he became very arrogant. But even with all the problems he caused, he was still seen as one of the Brotherhood's most valuable assets. But the Templars eventually discovered he was an assassin working for the East India Company, and so Philip Randall sent Duncan to join the West Indies Brotherhood and assist its mentor Atabai. Duncan didn't want to go on this mission because he would have to leave his position at the East India Company, and his ego was bruised when he learned he was to receive additional training from Atabai. So he turned down the mission, but later in that same day, he met a man named Henry Spencer, a member of the Templar Order who had hoped to recruit Duncan to his cause by convincing him that by being a Templar, Duncan could finally attain the fame and fortune he had failed to find in the Navy and the Assassins. And being the selfish man he is, Duncan accepted the offer and decided to go on the mission with Atabai so that he could sabotage the Assassins from the inside before officially defecting to the Templars. Which makes Duncan and Shay the only two characters in the series who went from being Assassins to Templars, excluding some of the modern day characters like Lucy and Daniel Cross. But Shay's motivations and reasons for doing so were pretty selfless and justifiable, as he wanted to prevent the loss of innocent lives. Duncan's betrayal was purely out of the selfishness to acquire fame and fortune. He once believed in what the Assassins stood for, but that belief clearly faded after over a decade of service. So when Duncan arrived in the West Indies, he spent his time there with the Brotherhood acting as a Templar spy, as he gathered valuable information about the different bureaus and assassin locations, and we can see the result of this in Black Flag as Edward, unknowingly, sells the maps and information Duncan collected to the Templars. While he was there, he also secretly corresponded with Governor Torres. Atabai, then incorrectly thinking he could trust Duncan, sent him on a mission to intercept a Templar ship that had captured the Sage Roberts. But Duncan took this as an opportunity to finally leave the Assassins and meet up with Torres and the other Templars in Havana. But as fate would have it, on his way, his ship would be ambushed by none other than the legend himself. And I think we all know what happens from there. So not only was Duncan a very egotistical and selfish member of the Brotherhood who grew to only care about himself, but from his actions in Black Flag, I also just think he's a flat-out idiot. First of all, not only is it insanely embarrassing for a master assassin who trained for over a decade to lose in a one-on-one fight to a pirate. Granted, Edward isn't your normal pirate, and Duncan may have been a bit injured, but I mean, Edward was also flung from the ship from the explosion, so that's just incredibly pathetic on Duncan's part. but he also very stupidly tells Edward, a pirate, that he has a bunch of money on him and that it's his if he helps him reach Havana.
Well, I'll just build us another ship, will I?
I'm sure if Edward actually did help him, he probably would have killed Edward to avoid paying him, just based on the kind of guy he is. But seriously though, Duncan, how did you think Edward was gonna get you out of this situation? Anyways though, because he foolishly told Edward how much money he has, Edward hopes to get his hands on it regardless. Duncan pulls a pistol on him, but because it was likely just in the water, it no longer works. But I've pointed this out before, he has another functioning pistol on his belt that works because he literally shoots Edward with it later. However, at this moment, it seems like he just forgets. So rather than trying to restrain Edward or pull the other pistol on him, he decides to run away like a coward. And then he gets chased down, has a free open shot on Edward, somehow misses the kill shot, and then gets put down like the pathetic master assassin he is. And thus, the anticlimactic end of the tale of Duncan Walpole. He really went through all that to get counter-killed by a pirate. And many people may not know this, but Duncan Walpole in the AC lore is the second cousin of Robert Walpole, the real-life first Prime Minister of Britain, who described Duncan as a treacherous man with few principles, who would sell the secrets of those who trusted him to the highest bidder, and that he was ashamed to see him bear the Walpole name. He spit on this man's grave. Edward actually met Robert Walpole as well, who thanked him for killing his treacherous cousin. Duncan's misfortune is the perfect example of well-earned karma. I mean, what are the odds he'd run into Edward Kenway while on his way to betraying the assassins? Duncan in Black Flag is clearly a plot device whose sole purpose is to move the story forward and get Edward involved in the whole Assassin-Templar conflict, but man, he really was a terrible assassin. Of course, it does take some cunning and intelligence to deceive Atabai and the other assassins, but even who we'd consider the bad assassins in the series, like Abbas, maybe Pierre Bellic, they at least thought what they were doing in their own minds was for the good of the Brotherhood. They at least cared about it in their own, slightly twisted ways. Duncan just wanted money and recognition to inflate his ego, and to die in the way he did is just a hilarious bit of karma. Oh, and funnily enough, Duncan is also an ancestor of Nathan from the Assassin's Creed movie. He's one of the side character modern-day assassins who helps Cal escape Abstergo. That's a pretty interesting connection. I've seen some people say over the years they wanted to see a Duncan Walpole DLC or little spin-off game following his earlier life and his betrayal of the assassins. It would be hilarious to just have that end with his death at the start of Black Flag. Could you imagine? That would be the most anticlimactic ending ever. Edward Kenway would be the final boss. But I am curious if they'll change anything in the Black Flag opening with Duncan in the remake that's in development. That would be very interesting. But that's the life of Duncan Walpole, the Brotherhood's worst master assassin, whether you wanted to know that much about him or not. I really do like making these videos on some of the smaller, more inconsequential characters from the games. It's so cool that a lot of them have these fleshed out backstories, considering they barely appear in the games. So let me know if there's another character you'd like me to talk about. And other than that, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and considered subscribing to the channel if you're new. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day, Assassins. Just know, if you ever betray the Brotherhood, you'll end up like good old Duncan.
Of all the money that e'er I had, I spent it in good company.